How's everybody doing? I apologize for my practice attire today. Came off the field and we had a group of prospects here that I was visiting with after practice. So came straight from that in here. It timed up well. Good to see everybody. I hope everybody had a wonderful Easter. And Shane gave the guys last Saturday off, which was very nice of him to do, and it ended up working out very well considering the weather. Felt really bad for those guys down there in Augusta, whether they were golfing or the fans that were attending. You know, I was trying to watch it on TV, and before you know it, you're watching old Masters highlights because of the delays and stuff. But it was a great weekend. I got to do some cooking on Saturday and Sunday, which was nice. And when I do that, if it's anything I've never done before, I call Jimmy Lindsay because he is our resident chef around here. So I didn't need to call him for the pasta and meat sauce that we did on Saturday night. But on Sunday, was doing a little rib roast, and that was right in the Jimmy Lindsay wheelhouse. So I reached out to him. He was a big help. And then, you know, you hear I have probably a little bit raspy voice right now, so I think that's probably just the post-practice stuff, or maybe it's a little cold. But my wife came down on Easter morning, and she had a little bit of a raspy voice going, and I said she sounded like Kim Carnes, and the older members of our group will know exactly who Kim Carnes is. Well, that did not go over very well. So when Monday morning rolled around and it was time to get back into the office, I was running out of the house bright and early, and then been working my way back into her good graces all week. So, but it's been a good week, and it's been a good spring. It's also been a lot of fun watching our baseball team and the success that they're having. So I want to congratulate Coach Kingston and that group, and I think they had another win Tuesday night, if I'm not mistaken. So it's always nice to see our other sports doing well here, while hopefully football's doing well. It's been a good spring so far. I think we've got a really good group of kids. Our days usually start with either a team meeting or a special teams meeting. And when everybody's in their seat a few minutes early and they're attentive and they're engaged, that usually means it's going to be a good day. And I've been known to steal an extra minute or two at the front end of those meetings when they are all in their seats. And so that's been good. It just kind of starts the day off the right way with the right mindset. And this group's been very good, very attentive. You feel like you can coach these guys. These veteran guys now, several of us are going into 3 years together. They know me, I know them. We've got really good relationships in place, and so you feel like you can coach them hard, coach them with respect, coach them fairly, but be direct with them. And they know by now if they come into one of my meetings and something didn't get done the right way, we're probably all going to learn from it the next day. So that's good. And these new players, it's a work in progress. For a lot of them, you have to put yourself in their shoes. Maybe they came from a high school program where they were by far the best player. And who knows if they even had a role on special teams. Now, they're one of many good players, and all of a sudden the fundamentals and the techniques and the expectations for attention to detail in this phase of the game are something that's very, very new to them, and the kind of effort that we expect in this phase of the game. And even for some of our transfer guys, wherever they came from, what their role may have been there versus what we expect out of them here. And, one of my mantras this spring, which applies to everybody in the room, is you never graduate from special teams. You're going to graduate from South Carolina. You're going to get your degree, and you're going to go on and hopefully be very successful, and we're going to prepare you hopefully to to make that transition into the real world someday, but you never graduate from special teams. And so just because somebody is not with us that was on the 2022 team, and now all of a sudden you may have a little bit bigger role on offense and defense, that doesn't mean all of a sudden the expectations for you are any less relative to this phase of the game. So all of that stuff is ongoing. We know that there's many new players on the roster this spring. There'll be another influx of guys in June that we're looking forward to working with this summer. So it's everybody's undefeated right now, right? Everybody's spirits are very high. It's a great time of year for propaganda. I tend to be a little bit more tempered with that stuff. I'm optimistic, but I'm cautiously optimistic. And, I savor every day that we have to hopefully get a little bit better and know that we have a long way to go before we step out on the field in Charlotte a few months from now. So that being said, I'm sure you guys have some questions for me.
Pete, I know that nobody's spot's given. You got to earn everything. That said, you've got some guys who've been here with Mitch and Kai. And, I mean, has spring been working more of the younger guys for, the future, or has it really been the same kind of reps that those guys normally get?
We always promote competition. We never want anybody to get too comfortable. And sometimes you have to force that. There's been days where we've mixed up the reps with the first unit, the second unit. To step away from your specialist question just a hair for a second, with the punt team, for example. Bam Martin Scott, the last 2 days, has been running with the ones, and DK Joyner has been running with the twos. DK Joyner has been looking at me very funny the last few days because he knows that's his spot, and he wants that spot. And being on the punt team at South Carolina is a big deal because it is the most trustworthy, reliable guys that are going to be on the punt team. And DK doesn't want to be demoted from the punt team, but he's also a veteran guy who knows, hey, I want to look at Bam and I want to put him in that position and see how he can handle the pressure of being a one on that unit. So we've been doing a fair amount of mixing and matching and moving guys in different positions too, so that we can come out of spring with a good sense for how adaptable guys are and how mentally flexible they are. But then veering back to your question about the specialists, yes, we have an experienced group, and now it's becoming an older group. But crazy things happen too. And I won't forget last preseason when, we weren't sure if Kai Kroger was going to be able to play against Georgia State. And all of a sudden we've got a major competition going on. All of a sudden somebody pulls a hamstring or something like that. So you've got to keep promoting that healthy competition and keep pushing everybody to be the best they can be. And I will give Alex Herrera a lot of credit because he continues to be a very competent backup that can do a lot of things for us. And William Joyce has had himself a nice spring. And there's still some things he needs to work on that he's well aware of. But he's changed his body since he's gotten here. A credit to him, a credit to Luke Day and the strength and conditioning staff, because William looks like a different guy than when he got here. And it's translating to what he's doing as a punter and as a kicker. So Cole Rasmussen, who is our backup long snapper this spring, has improved. And he knows he's going to have to compete, with a PWO who will be coming in this summer. So that's ongoing. It's ongoing, and that's why it's important to make sure that every year you're trying to bring in a guy or two. Your numbers are always going to be somewhat limited. We're never going to have a specialist room with a dozen guys in it because of roster limitations and so forth. But you like to have some guys coming in that can add to that competition.
We've heard a little bit that the game plan is going to be kind of vanilla for this weekend with, the way that you like to run special teams. How much are you actually able to get out of the spring game in terms of running plays and things like that?
Yeah, so it's a final exam, but it's a low percentage final exam. I never liked those classes in college that were the final was like 50% of the grade. I like those finals that were 20 or 25% of the grade. And I think that's how you need to look at a spring game. You want to see how guys perform in front of a crowd and with the lights on, but you also don't want to overshadow what may or may not have taken place in the previous 14 practices. I do like the fact that we integrate special teams into our scrimmages and our spring game. I think that's important. Again, it's a big part of who we are and our culture here, so we'll certainly do that some on Saturday. But it is going to be short and sweet and making sure that the guys that need to get evaluated one last time get that, making sure that we put some pressure on our specialists in front of a crowd, some guys that are maybe in a role where we need to see them compete a few more times. We'll make sure that happens. One thing we do in the spring that you guys might be interested in is we take all of our players that are involved in special teams. So it's basically the entire roster minus the quarterbacks and minus the linemen that are not involved directly in special teams. And we divide up those remaining players into 4 mini teams, spring teams we call them. They have a nickname, they have a theme song, they have coaches assigned to them, they have support staff assigned to them. And then almost every day in the spring, today was no exception, we have a competition as part of our special teams drills in practice that day. And there are matchups, so I'll sit in there with Tyler Zielinski and we'll say we want this guy against this guy for that rep. And it's tedious, it takes time, but it's worth it. And then we'll go out and we'll compete during practice. And then we will grade it, we will post it, we will show it the next day in the meeting. We keep track of cumulative scores over the course of the spring. And then eventually there'll be a spring champion that'll be honored at our final team dinner of the spring semester. So we make a big deal out of it. The guys get into it, and it makes it a little bit more interesting. I'll have a player of the day every day based on who might perform well in those competitions and so forth. So there'll be some kind of carrot involved as well as part of these ongoing competitions that applies to Saturday.
Rib roast turned out well?
It turned out just fine.
And then kind of sticking off that, going to Saturday, what makes a successful spring game for you as a coordinator? What are you kind of looking for? What would make you feel like you've accomplished what you need to accomplish going into the summer out of practice tomorrow and the spring game?
Focus. Who can stay focused? Who is not going to get caught up in the moment and all of a sudden not put forth their best in those limited opportunities on special teams. And I can remember back, and I've actually used it as an example with our staff already, and I'll remind our players of this on Saturday morning. But we had a guy in last year's spring game. He made a big play, and then all of a sudden we transitioned to a special teams period, and his unit was called out there, and now we're looking for him, and he's over there celebrating on the sideline. Got caught up in the moment and wasn't able to enjoy that, but move on from that moment and realize that there was more work to be done that day. And so that's a maturity thing, right? That's and as we're looking to develop these young guys, that's a big part of it. Can we trust you? Are you going to be reliable? Are you going to be the same guy every day? Whatever limitations we all have, that's okay as long as we know what those are. and we're going to get your best. So that's what I look for in the spring game is guys being sharp, guys being focused, short and sweet, great effort, put some good reps on film that we can turn around and say, all right, we saw you at your best.
Pete, I know you've talked about, I think it was earlier this spring, that you have more coaches reaching out to you, wanting to have like webinars or just be able to pick your brain a little bit. But from a recruiting standpoint, when some of these players come through this spring, even other coaches that are coaching these high school players, are you noticing special teams being part of the sell to come to South Carolina now? We hear so much about lockers and this and that from different programs, but with the way special teams has been, and especially with that caveat of being able to play in the NFL, are you noticing that's more of a sell?
I am, and I'll give you a tangible example. So I'm walking through the training room this morning, and there was a prospect here who was visiting for practice, and I kind of waved to say hello, and then I'm walking out the door, and he comes over and he finds me, and he says, "Hey, I just wanted to introduce myself. I absolutely love special teams, and I know that's a big deal here." So there's an example of it. And we had another prospect here last week who, when he visited with Coach Beamer after practice, specifically mentioned to him, "Wow, you guys had 3 special teams periods in this practice, and you guys got after it." And that says a lot about who you are and what's important here. So we love when prospects come and watch us practice, because our tempo is really good. Our guys are moving from period to period with a sense of urgency, and they're going to see plenty of special teams integrated into the body of practice, and that we're going to coach them hard in those periods, and hopefully look like we know what we're doing. So it's good to see, and I do think we had our coaches clinic a few weeks ago, and the interest that we're getting in guys coming here and wanting to talk about special teams has been really good. So that's a good problem for me to have. If high school coaches and college coaches want to come here and talk special teams with us, I don't mind that at all.
Assuming Xavier Leggett and Eddie Lewis are among your top guys in the return game, anyone else who's kind of stood out to you as those who could be reliable on the road?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. So a guy who definitely deserves some kudos this spring is Juju McDowell. I have seen the best version of Juju this spring. Very good focus. He's always got energy. But I've seen a maturity out of him this spring, and more of an attention to detail out of him. And that's shown up at kick returner, but it's also shown up just in all the other things we do special teams wise. He's growing up. He's always had that likability because he's energetic and talented and bright-eyed and all that, but I think he's starting to mature as a person and as a player, and I've tried to go out of my way several times this spring to let him know that.
Pete, this is a little more big picture and maybe a little subjective, but when you're evaluating prospects as specialists, kicker, punter, whatever it is, what goes into actually deciding what specialist might be worthy of a scholarship? I know that's a little more unique than relative to a receiver, quarterback, whatever it is. I mean, what goes into that, and I guess maybe how big a deal is it for a guy to get a scholarship offer?
Well, it's about knowns versus unknowns, because it's a huge decision, right? One of the hardest things to do in pro sports is to make an NFL roster as a specialist. One of the hardest things to do in college sports is to get a scholarship as a specialist. Because there are very few of them, and therefore you really can't afford to make a mistake. So in an ideal world, you are promoting from within, and you have guys like a Hunter Rogers who's in your program, and you've spent nearly every day with this guy, and really know what he's all about and what makes him tick. And you've seen him perform and improve and handle himself under pressure to a point where you say, yep, he's the guy. And we have no reservations whatsoever about putting him on scholarship. When you're taking a guy out of high school for one of those spots, I mean, it is a very, very thorough process, in my opinion, that you need to go through to make sure that you are limiting your risk, right? Because if you make a mistake, it's not like the offensive line where you've got 16 of them on scholarship or 15 of them on scholarship. Not that you want to make a mistake anywhere, but certainly at specialist, you want to be relatively sure of what you're getting. And it's very interesting that Mitch Jeter was here because I was recruiting Mitch at Memphis, and Mitch came out to Memphis and spent a day with us and had a really good camp with us, and I enjoyed getting to know him and his family. And shortly after we offered Mitch at Memphis, he got an offer here at South Carolina. And I'm not saying that our Memphis offer influenced the staff here in any way. It probably didn't hurt, but they had their own process that they were going through. But I saw Mitch twice in person and did a lot of research on Mitch before I got to a point where I was comfortable doing that. And as somebody that spent half their career as a head coach, I don't want to be that guy who says, to the head coach, hey, here's what I recommend, and then be wrong. You have a little bit more flexibility with PWOs, but those spots are selective too. So, because again, roster spots are limited. But the nice thing about bringing in a guy as a walk-on is that you have time now to see if they grow and develop and become that, and then promote them from within, which is comforting in a lot of ways. So every situation is different. And I think having that balance, but it's a thorough process. I would compare it to recruiting a quarterback, where you want to see a lot of film, but seeing them live, and then the personality, the compatibility, and you guys know, because most of you have been listening to me for now going on 3 years. Like, I'm not a specialist coach. I'm a football coach, and I coach these guys the same way that I would coach tight ends or linebackers. And so there's a personality piece to all that. There's a demeanor, there's a mindset, there's an athletic component, there's a thick skin component to it, because we want our guys to be respected by the whole team. We want them to be fully integrated into the team. And so there's a certain type of person that has the mindset to do that. And I really like the group of guys that we have right now.
Hey, Pete, you talked about when you were coming in that you went straight from practice to being with some recruits and then straight in with us. You've been an associate or an assistant head coach with a couple of different programs. Is that, what are the things that are on the associate or assistant head coach's plate that aren't on another assistant's plate?
I like to call it other duties as assigned. It's kind of like the final bullet point in your job description. And that can mean different things on different days and different things to different people, and different things to different head coaches. I would say with Shane Beamer, it's a sounding board type of role most of the time, which I appreciate. I don't think there's ever been a time when he hasn't come to me and asked me my 2 cents about something when I haven't said, hey, thanks for doing that, because I actually do have an opinion about it, and I may or may not have shared it if you hadn't come. The other piece is a willingness to go and let him know how I feel about something if I feel strongly about it. And, we all know the nature of organizations and personalities and so forth. And I feel like a big part of my role is that I need to be willing and have the confidence and be comfortable enough with myself to say some things to him, whether that be in a staff meeting or privately, that maybe not everybody else is willing to do. And I feel like that's part of my role here as well. And then when it comes to our assistant coaches, I'm in a pretty unique spot because I don't coach on the offense or the defense. So I try to be as objective as I can be relative to what's going on with a player or relative to what's going on with a side of the ball. And I try to have a relationship with everybody in the building as best I can. That doesn't mean you're going to be best friends with everybody. Obviously, the guys you've worked with now for going on 3 years, you're probably going to be a little bit closer with them than maybe a newer member of the staff. But I try to be accessible. And if somebody has something that they want to get off their chest or want my 2 cents on something, I feel like I have a responsibility and I enjoy being there in those situations. And then lastly, I would say with our young coaches, these guys are very fortunate to have opportunities in an organization like ours, but they need to grow and they need to develop and they need to hopefully have decent role models, right? That they can learn from. And so when I have a 20-minute special teams meeting, yes, I want to maximize the impact of that meeting for those 75 players in there. But I also know there's a group of young assistant coaches that are in that back row that are GAs and analysts and student assistants and whatnot. And in some way, shape, or form, if they're smart, which I think they are, they're going to model and shape their future careers off of the veteran coaches that they're around. And so, I had great mentors in my 20s and guys I still keep in touch with. I'm going to a wedding in a couple weeks. Kevin Higgins, his youngest daughter, is getting married down in Charleston. And Kevin hired me when I was 28 at Lehigh and was a tremendous mentor to me for 3 years. I took over for him when he left to go to the NFL. And then he ended up back at the Citadel when I was at Elon. We have been great friends. We talk all the time, and I still call him for advice. And I call him, as a resource all these years later. So if I can in any way, shape, or form do that for some of our young coaches, then I feel like that's part of our job as well.
How much has Frank Beamer talked to you about the special teams recognition that you brought to this program, much like he did when he was getting it going at Virginia Tech?
So all I can say is I want to be Frank Beamer when I retire. I have never seen such a happy guy. And I can't imagine he was always that happy when he was a head coach and when he was coaching special teams. We had a couple days off after signing day. And I took our youngest daughter, Victoria, on a trip up to Blacksburg to visit Virginia Tech. And so, of course, while we were there, we had to see the Beamers. And, when you have a 16-year-old daughter, it's like, why are we doing this? And, I thought this trip was about me and, we're going to spend the afternoon with the Beamers. She had a blast with the Beamers. Didn't want to leave their house. And Virginia Tech's stock rose even more because of the couple hours that we spent with them before we left town. I admire him so much because I think whenever that time came for him to say, I'm done, he was ready to walk away and then enjoy this next stage of his life. So when I see him, he's always very grateful and appreciative of what we're doing and how we're doing it, and how it's helped our program and Shane and everything get going in the right direction. But I don't think he wants to really sit down and talk a whole lot of football at this point. I think he's and you know what? I could see myself being the same way when that time comes, because I'm all in and I'm full speed ahead, and you got to do this hard, and you got to do this to the best of your ability. But when it's time to walk away, then you probably earned the opportunity to enjoy the rest of it the way he's doing. And he's a great human being, and there's not a time that he's not around, that I don't see him, that I don't go out of my way to talk to him, and I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to know him.
Coach, go. Appreciate everybody.
Okay, good seeing everybody. Thanks so much.